Thank you for joining us for the presentation and over the next few minutes as we talk about belonging. I am Tasin Chaudhary, and today I will present some important insights that Dr. Sreyashi Badawi and I have worked on over the past few months to help you get started with thinking about belonging and its relevance in the workplace, especially for early career women. Uh, we're here today to serve two main purposes. First, to introduce you to the concept of belonging, and second, to share results from a study funded by the National Science Foundation that we had an opportunity to collaborate on. I'd also like to mention Crystal P., who is our colleague, and Robin Odd, one of the leading instructors in the senior design teams at Virginia Tech, for their invaluable contribution to this work. First off, to introduce ourselves, we are engineering educators who work with human capital data to help improve the 21st century STEM workforce. I am a researcher, currently a fourth year PhD candidate at Virginia Tech. I am an international student. I work with human capital data, and I'm interested in understanding the transition between academia and engineering workforce. Uh, my co-presenter, Sriyoshi, she's a research scientist. She's interested to understand more about the different horizons of women in tech, and she is also an engineering educator. All right, let's think about belonging first. In simple terms, belonging is defined as an affinity for a place or situation. And if we look at it from the workplace perspective, and for the context of this paper, we understand belonging as feeling connected and being integrated with others at work or fitting in the workplace. Now, a question that might be relevant to all of us in the workplace. I want all of you hearing this talk to think about your own experiences, wherever you are or where, and reflect whether belonging that I just defined is relevant to you. Just take a minute. All right. So let's take back ourselves back in academia and imagine that you have just graduated as a woman in STEM. In fact, you have landed your first job as a computer programmer. So that's very exciting. Now, however, did you know that the pay gap impacts almost all jobs? And yes, as you just see the description, even computer science and programming has also pay gap impacts. Specifically, women may earn only 72 cents for every dollar that men in the same position make. However, the reality is tough and the economy is very competitive, and you're happy to accept what you have right now. Another example of is this visual, which is pay and impacted by race. And this visual is a very real indicator of just how much lesser women of certain races are paid on an average compared to white men in the workplaces. Really shocking, right? All right. So obviously, the new employee, as they progress through the years and gets paid or valued less than certain other colleagues, gets increasingly delusioned and demotivated through time in their career. And the pay gap is just one of the several factors that contribute to the sense of lack of belonging among women and other minorities. Looking from engineering and the STEM lens, it is predominantly Caucasian and male, with small pockets of diversity, which may often lead to negative impact on underrepresented population, especially women. In fact, some studies highlight the negative impacts on the sense of belonging among women in discipline included, which includes negative experiences faced within their teams, where they were excluded from real engineering tasks and relegated to menial tasks in projects. Now, several factors are responsible for why women may not even feel like they belong. According to a recent study, women are leaving the workforce at an alarming rate, and many of these women are not looking to return. And to add with that, the pandemic caused the rate at which women leaving to even increase. And because of COVID 19, uh, women leaving has progressed, and research has suggested that companies focus on underlying causes of this disturbing trend. So, looking back at the definition of what is belonging again and relating with a few statistics shared. So, just wanted to remind all of you that it is important. Studies, including a recent one conducted at the Wharton People Analytics, have shown that higher sense of belonging can actually lead, among other things, to 75% fewer sick days, 50% lower rate of turnover, 56% increase in job performance, twice as many raises, and 18 times more likely promotions within a 6 month period. So, thus, a lower sense of belonging among employees is actually detrimental as organizations try to succeed. And to make things worse, as I described before, the pandemic is not making anything easier. In fact, many of us may not know what to do. There will be many times in our career that this actually happens. So there was a recent McKinsey report that suggested that by 2030, 70 million odd jobs would be eliminated, and an additional 50 million would need to change their occupations. So think about COVID 19 and how people have had to pivot to working remote through a pandemic, and the skills that they had to hone, the new technologies they had to master. It has a lot to do with situations that are new, and it refers to learning new things and taking up new challenges. So, moving along with our actual study, we used secondary data from a 2017 longitudinal study funded by the National Science Foundation. And the main purpose of the study was to understand the experiences of new graduates as they transitioned from the senior year to the engineering workplace. From the weekly quantitative surveys administered during the first 12 weeks of the participants starting their jobs, it was found that male participants reported higher levels of perceived preparedness than female participants. And over time, in fact, 3 months into their jobs, men still reported significantly higher preparedness, indicating that they were likely acclimating more quickly than women to the workplaces. So, this analysis early into the participants' first job in tech and engineering found that women likely faced more challenges during their first 3 months of the work than men, and men are more likely to perceive that they belong in engineering. Following this analysis of the data from the quantitative survey, we did a deep dive into a qualitative survey through an hour-long semi-structured interviews, which participants described about their challenges. And here are some of the examples of those challenges which participants mentioned during their experience. So one of the participants into the 3 month of your job mentioned, it's just lots of side comments being thrown. One of my coworkers was making a joke about how if you drink too much beer, you'll become unintelligible like a woman. Our engineers will only tend to address my coworkers and not me. So if I want to be a part of a conversation, I must actively place myself in a spot where I can engage, and it's been hard. Today, there's three of them and me. Just like the way they positioned themselves didn't allow me to enter their little circle so I could hear. Similarly, another participant into the 6 months experience just mentioned, in the beginning of 3 months, it would have been getting to know my coworkers, having a good relationship with them, being able to absorb everything, and then as we advanced towards 6 months, it was staying away from particular people just because this is kind of interesting. We have a coworker who's very condescending, among dismissive of women. So there was that also that I had to work with. And once one of the participants went into the 12-month and ending 1 year, she mentions, I heard one of the coworkers say, like, oh, she's always smiling. It's so nice to see. Just stuff like that. And I don't know. It was just like very subtly sexist. I don't really know where I thought I would be a year from when I started, just because I think I'm so overwhelmed with the amount of learning that I had to do. I guess I wanted to be in a place where I would be really comfortable. But I mean, I don't know. So those were some of the excerpts that participants mentioned during the 3, 6, and 12 months into their workplaces. And there were further data that showed that challenges faced by women were markedly different from those faced by men. In addition, with time, these challenges, and as a result, the perceived sense of belonging, varied differently for women as they did for men. So, some of the examples of barriers that women faced are difficulty communicating within teams, being left out of important communication, not feeling that they can identify within the role, and the need to attend necessarily responsibilities outside of work. So these barriers can lead to women not feeling that they belong due to them feeling excluded, exhausted, or even pressured to work with ways that align with their values and responsibilities outside of the workplace. So let's look at the specific themes that I just discussed from the previous slide, which is on teamwork and communication, identity development, and lifelong learning. So, in terms of teamwork and communication, over the first year at work, 90% of women reported challenges with teamwork and communication versus 79% of male participants. Within the 3, 6, and 12-month timeframes, we identified the most salient barriers for women. More specifically, we found that within the 3-month timeframe, women identified corporate policies as barriers to learning and engaging with the team. And during the 6-month milestone, women felt excluded from teams due to them not being addressed within conversations and consulted for expertise. They also identified that the communication norms differed across teams. And finally, at the complete year milestone, women noted that their disconnect within the team made them rely on other people to relay or gather information, which had implications for their lack of engagement within teams. So, from each of the milestones, it is important to note that women attribute their lack of engagement within teams as a barrier to productivity due to the lack of knowledge transfer among team members and lack of support from managers. Additionally, I also wanted to say that the barriers that these women faced in regard to not being heard among members of the team, their experiences not being valued, and the adapting to varying cultures across team interdisciplinary teams made these women question their belonging within the team. In most cases, the culture of the team served as a proxy for the company. Therefore, women often noted that team culture made them question their belonging at the company. And these challenges highlight the need and importance of revamping the culture around communication within team settings in order to promote the sharing of ideas and inclusion of individual expertise within the team setting. All right, now let's go into identity development and thinking about looking at the data over here. Over the year time period, as you see, 87% of the women that were interviewed described identity development as a challenge within their position, compared to just 63% of the male participants. The theme that was consistent throughout all of these 3, 6, and 12-month interviews was that women needed to feel as if they were working towards their personal and professional goals while they were working on projects that contributed to the business needs. The need to be self fulfilled intensified in the interview participants throughout all the interviews. For example, at the 3-month interview, women began documenting what aspects of their job they did not enjoy and did not expect to do. As early as 6 months, these women considered leaving their respective industry due to not having opportunity to work within a team or project they were promised. At the 12-month interview, it was documented that women who wanted to leave the industry intended to do so because of the culture that they described as male dominant. So, based on the data collected, women feel as if they are not being fulfilled professionally nor personally. And their lack of fulfillment has implications for not only their retention of the company, but also their retention in the industry as well. So while business needs must be fulfilled, it is important that women understand how their contribution towards their job also significantly contributed towards their professional and personal success. So, women who have a professional identity within their role are more likely to feel like they are fit for the culture within the company and industry at large. Now, as we go into the lifelong learning perspective, and over the course of the year, 77% of women, as you see from the data, identified lifelong learning as a barrier to success compared to 56% of the male participants. Yes, they did both decrease in terms of the percentage for women and men, but however, the percentage of women reporting the crisis of lifelong learning as a barrier was still higher throughout the 3, 6, and 12 months. So when it comes to lifelong learning, employees need to be put in situations where they can manage their own time and work. Now, our data show that women acknowledge that their workload consists of technical work as well as social and administrative work that includes diversity, coordination, meetings, etc. Now, this increase in workload made them feel as if their time and expertise were undervalued in relationship to the job that they were assigned to do. Additionally, we found out that these individuals indicated that the extensive workloads that they were given required lots of time and were not flexible in regard to the task and the time that was required. So, for example, at the 3-month interview, participants indicated that their priorities were not made clear by the supervisor, and their supervisor would assign time intensive projects to the employees within days of which they were due. At the 6-month interview, participants indicated that the size of the workload and the lack of direction from the supervisor made female participants extremely stressed. And to deal with this increased stress, participants indicated that they felt they needed time off to cope, but however, they did not perceive that they could be honest about what they needed. So, from the lifelong learning perspective, it is important that employees are given workloads and where they perceive that they can manage how they spend their time and organize their given tasks. So, by the women describing their workloads as impossible, undervalued, and lacking direction, it implies that women are not given adequate resources that they need to complete tasks, and they are not given sufficient direction to understand how their time needs to be allocated. So, as opposed to men, women face the unique burden of stereotype threat, which makes them feel as if they cannot speak up for their needs regarding their workload, time, and resources. So, as I described the different circumstances where women faced barriers in the workplace that included teamwork and communication, identity development, and lifelong learning, here are some suggestions that we pose to individuals and managers, which can actually help improve belonging among women that relates to all three different themes. So, first up, coming from the teamwork and communication perspective, there needs to be an understanding of how systematic problems present barriers to women not being able to work within the team. Also, we think that each team has its own culture that may not be in line with the overall corporate culture. Second of all, we think that there needs to be guidance across various functions to support the collaboration among different teams. In addition, there also needs to be support systems in place to enforce how women communicate, especially within a person being a year at the company. And lastly, we believe that managers should be aware, conscious, and ultimately intentional about considering gender while training or encouraging practice of teamwork in the workplace. In terms of identity development, we suggest that even though there are business needs, people need to advance towards their own professional goals to feel that they fit in within the workplace. In addition, we also suggest that women need to feel like they can advance towards their own goals. If not, they feel like they need to leave. We also believe that it is important for managers to acknowledge that as a woman, being able to see oneself in a brave space, especially after 12 months, is very important if they are to persist within the field, much less the company. And also, we promote training for employees to encourage the support and understanding of experiences for women, and other minoritized groups such as allyship and unconscious bias training. And lastly, in terms of lifelong learning, we believe that managers need to engage in gender inclusive training to acknowledge the differences in the experiences among women and men. These experiences of women in the lifelong learning aspect are different from men, and the challenges they face are unique. So, managers need to be aware of that. In addition, managers need to be transparent regarding their priorities and needs of business for employees to understand how to manage their time accordingly. And lastly, managers need to develop and regularly use and share a resource guide to help employees know where to find resources, ask questions, and seek guidance. So, our analysis showed that women did not feel like they belonged within the workplace. And based on the data that we analyzed, we are proposing that companies consider the challenges of belonging for women and other minoritized groups as they develop policies and encourage workplace practices. As we move on and as women enter the workforce, they begin the process of socialization by learning the culture and also determining how the work processes align with their own values and assessing whether they can succeed personally and professionally. And these experiences that women have during the process of socialization is what makes women perceive whether they belong or not. So, overall, from our study, we were able to determine the barriers to belonging for teamwork and communication, identity development, and lifelong learning at 3, 6, and 12-month milestones. We believe that this study will help companies understand what women are perceiving as barriers at each of these milestones. And this knowledge would also help in identifying appropriate and adequate interventions to promote the retention and persistence of women at each of the milestones. Additionally, the key takeaways that we have provided for managers, they can easily implement it in order to make women feel that they belong. And we hope that our key takeaways and proposed ways are adopted by managers and teammates to make a better inclusive workplace. So overall, implementing these data-informed insights and grounded in views of women in the workplace into practice will actually ensure that our research is used in an impactful way to make sure that women belong. I would like to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to present our results. And I'd also like to remind that this work was based on research supported by the National Science Foundation. And our bios are given here. And please feel free to contact us if anyone has any more questions. And feel free to get in touch over LinkedIn. If you search our names, you'll surely find us there. So thank you so much for giving us the time to present. And I hope you all enjoyed this presentation.